Théodore Kouadio from Côte d'Ivoire is a brilliant writer who does very much works for Fraternité Matin, the main leading newspaper in Côte d'Ivoire, and he does daily online news, and he also does small pieces, but once in a while he does this big research. He tackles one issue. He tackles taboos in his country of children with deformities that are sometimes killed in his country. He does a long research on 2-3 pages focusing on the subject, covering it from all angles, and shocking some people in his country with the subject, but really creating a discussion on it. And Nihal Ashin from Egypt, she writes about wrong drugs that are on the market and warns people that something is going wrong. So these three science journalists have contributed to more change than many brilliant writers in rich countries. I mean, I will never get near to what they've achieved because they really improve lives of people, while I'll just report on accidents that happen and don't change anything by it. I mean, I'm not saying that in rich countries you can't contribute to change, but what these people are, they work under quite difficult conditions, and the idea is to support them and to help them to support others, to build the journalistic profession. Okay, so we do all these things that I've just briefly described, and now my job is to come up with procedures to see whether we actually do it and what was going wrong, what could have been improved, what can we learn from this. So I came up with different things we could do. This is, if you will, social science methodology. We do telephone interviews with mentees. We call them, how are you? What's going on? What are your problems? We call their bosses, and this is where the newsroom research comes in. We ask the bosses, how important is science journalism for you? Is it more important than politics? Why not? How many science reporters do you have? Do you need more? And so on. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, we do questionnaires. We do content analysis. So we try to see if the quality of the writing improves, and I'll tell you in a minute why. And then we are very much interested now in understanding these special stories that I indicated with these 3 examples. We want to understand, how did Esther do this to get the drug official fired? What happens when Theodore publishes his controversial 2-page main stories? How is it discussed in the public? How do politicians react to this? So we haven't done this yet, but we're doing a lot of planning on how we can track the events after publication of important stories. Okay, quickly on the that was the overview. So I'll just briefly hint at what we do on the content analysis side. Probably you know more about content analysis than I do. I think it's a very complex method if you want to do it right. Fortunately, we have partners from Switzerland, from the Institute of Applied Media Studies there, who have developed a method of measuring quality change in journalistic products, especially in developing countries, but it's a method that can be applied anywhere, of course. So what they do is they define quality criteria not by themselves, not by looking at the literature only and by imposing academic criteria on journalism, but they interviewed, and I was part of this, we interviewed all mentors in the project on what they think is important for good quality science journalism. And they discussed things like it needs to have many sources, it needs to be transparent where the information comes from, there should be some narrative elements maybe. So they discussed all dimensions and possible aspects of what quality can mean. And then you do this very scientific thing of putting a lot of boxes of what is quality, of what contributes to quality. So you have maybe 20 boxes of quality criteria. And then you go and ask every of these 75 mentees to send you his latest 5 articles. And then you check in these 75 times 5 articles for these 20 criteria. So you go through these articles and check how many sources, are there any narrative elements, are simple terms well explained, and so on. And then you really get an objective measure of the quality. And this is what we've just been doing, we have the so-called time zero, we have the baseline study. So we know now at the onset of our project what the new mentees that we chose a year ago to work with us, what their writing quality is at the moment. Yeah, we don't give grades, it's individual, it depends on their working environment, it depends on what they want to do in the future, but we have some baseline of what their writing is like now. And then we will look in a year or in 2 years from now, what has changed, what was the improvement. And then we'll know if all our efforts of training, of mentoring, of support in many ways, if it has had any effect on the writing quality. Because you can talk a lot about people feeling better or people enjoying the international contacts and so on. Here it's a true measure of, is the science writing in the newspapers all over Africa, has it improved through our project or not? And it'll be tough for us because we cannot influence the result except work hard and help people. Just to give you an example of what these Swiss colleagues have give to us, it's many pages, but I just have one here. They say, basically, what it says here on this slide is, your mentees don't explain things in simple terms. I mean, I'm not saying this is the most important thing in science journalism, but it's certainly one important thing to be able to say, if you talk about vaccine, that you can explain what the vaccine is in certain articles. And the content analysis shows that 50% of the articles the mentees sent us do not explain concepts. So they just take concepts and work with them as if they don't need no explanation. So this is something we have to work on. This is something the mentors will now have to, in one way or another, teach the mentees or talk about to the mentees, so the explanatory parts of the articles get better. And we have this for all kinds of, quality, sources usage, narration, variants of writing, variants of formats. Do they use graphics and all these things? So we hope that this will change. What is one other point I would like to mention, there's a big difference between science journalists from rich and poor countries in what they want to achieve. Science journalists in Africa see themselves as educators, which I would personally always say, no, I'm not a teacher. I don't teach the public about health. I inform the public, I observe science, that's something I would say. But in Africa, it would be, for many science journalists, it would be very natural to say, I teach the public. I do other things too, but I teach them. And the second thing that is different is they want to change policies in their countries. We have done in-depth interviews on the quality, as I told you, with the mentors. And it's interesting, half of our mentors are from the north, from rich countries, and they don't care so much for policy change. But the journalists in the south, they care for policy change. They want to see the ministries of health doing something. They want, in environmental sectors or technology issues, they want something to improve in their countries. And this is what we'll use now. We do hope that with their ambitions, that of course they don't always meet, the goals are not always achieved, that we can help them perform in that through the project. So how do we do this? I talked a lot about the content quality, which is in the middle. We train through Scoop. We have the individual capacities of the mentees that are there already, of course. We analyze the editorial structures. That means we interview at the moment the editors-in-chief. This is something I've been done with a number of colleagues that I haven't put the name here. They've done interviews for me. I've just designed the questions. Just to give you an idea of the Francophone group, just maybe it becomes a little more concrete for you. These are all the newspapers that we have representatives of, if you will, the science editors of these newspapers, Quotidien Mutation. Well, you can read for yourself. We have one mentee in each of these papers, and the other radio stations and websites. This is where our mentees come from. So what we did, and we have many more, but with those 13 from Francophone Africa, my colleague Augustin Denis called the editors-in-chief and said, can we take half an hour to discuss science journalism? Which is already good, because this editor-in-chief suddenly starts thinking, my goodness, there's somebody taking part in the program. Maybe I should watch this guy, what he's actually doing, and if I can support him or if he's improving. And then I analyzed the results in many ways. one simple thing to do is just to make a difference between the newsrooms. So I saw now not only in the Francophone group, but in all over Africa, where the base is 40 interviews. We saw a large portion of newsrooms, 15, with no or little organizational structures for science journalism. I have to admit, in Germany, 1/3 of the newspapers don't have structures for science journalism. And the other third has part-time people doing sometimes a science page once a week. And only the other third are the big newspapers with these great science beats. It's a general tendency generally concerning science beat I didn't mention in the first part. It's that the nationwide big newspapers like Globe and Mail, they have brilliant science editors in teams. And the smaller local newspapers have nothing at all. So there's this discrepancy between local, regional newspapers and the national newspapers. Also, the public broadcasters have good science reporting, and the private channels have very little. And it's maybe this is something to be studied for Canada, to see what is the problem in science reporting of regional media. Because regional media are the ones that are read. It's not that the national papers are the important ones to the audiences. We journalists always think, we only read Globe and Mail. But these regional newspapers, they have audiences, enormous audiences, and they don't get any good science news. Anyway, that's a different topic. We have the same problem in Africa. That's what I'm trying to say. 18 of those we interviews have some organizational structures. That means at least one full-time journalist or regular person who does a page. And then we have in our group 7 with really good structures. They have at least 2 full-time journalists and regular sections. So it's not, you cannot say that in West Africa there is no science beat. It's not true. In West Africa there are strong science departments. Whether they produce quality or not, we'll see. But there are full-time science journalists that we can work with in West Africa. And the other region, this is the total. I'm sorry, I know I'm wrong. This is the Francophone group, so we only have one with strong structures. I should have looked up which one it is. So actually, as you probably know, journalism in Francophone Africa is weak. I mean, it's not the journalists, but it's the general structure of these countries that makes this Francophone group, a difficult group. But this is where we hope to, achieve the most change also. So they have only one newsroom with good structures and 7 with no structures at all. And we also asked the editors-in-chief, do you have any future plans for science journalism in your newsroom? Now that this great mentoring program is running, maybe you want to contribute to improving it. And 16 said, no, I don't care, let me alone. 9 said, yes, I want to increase the staff. I don't know if they were telling the truth, because when somebody from Canada calls you, maybe say what you think he wants to hear. 16 said, well, maybe I can try giving more space to these journalists if they get better in writing. And 8 said, well, first of all, we need to improve the skills of these people, and then we can see if we want more of them or give them more space. In the Francophone group, actually, the